All right, let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Stuart, and I just want to thank you for spending your Tuesday with us for this Flexi webinar. So we're going to be talking about alignment, space, and distribution of objects in Flexi. And today presenting will be the wonderful Bobby Fossen. And Bobby has had a couple decades of experience with Flexi. He's been using it for a long time in sign shops, reseller, and support. He's been doing everything with it. So he's the one that will be able to answer all your questions. So he's going to go ahead and give his 20-minute presentation, after which we'll open it up for questions. These can be about alignment in Flexi, or if you just ever have any other lingering questions that you want to ask him about it, go for that. And with that, we'll turn the time over to Bobby.
Hello, everybody. I appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day, depending on which time zone you're in. I know it's sometimes difficult to get away, but like I said, I really appreciate you spending the time with us. And hopefully, I will be able to show you a few things today that's going to save you actually some time during the actual work that you do, and which obviously just boils down to the bottom line. You're going to save some profit or save some money in order to make a little bit more profit margin. So today, during the Flexi workshops, I get quite a few phone calls requesting before the actual workshop, what are we going to be covering? One of their questions, quite a bit, is will we be going over how to move objects, align them, register them, and I get the call or get the email and call quite a bit about what is distribution. We actually got it during our last webinar at the very end, so I want to make sure that I go over that. I honestly did not use it on a regular basis when I used the Flexi product as an end user, but I actually have a couple of different options of why you might actually use that and try to get that taken care or be able to use that. So we'll go ahead and jump into this because today we're going to go over the align functions as well as distribute, spacing, and sizing. So with this in mind, the align menu under arrange and align, we've got all kinds of different options here. But one of the first things that is going to be asked is what's the difference between the top portions here, as in the left top, right bottom, as well as left edge to page and so forth. The question always comes up, what is the page? Not everybody knows the page. Some people turn it off. And a few people, such as Rick Sachs in there, might still remember Castmate. There was no page. So I definitely want to at least go over that with you as well. But a couple things to keep in mind while we're doing this, and I will show you, is object priority is going to make a difference in how these objects are aligned, as well as grouped objects. We'll also be going over some shortcut keys, show you the right click option. And again, there's another option in there called text baseline under the arrange that right here at the very bottom. Again, a lot of people don't know what that is, so we'll touch on that. Going through the arrange and the size function, it's basically setting the objects, multiple objects, to the same height, the same width, and again, object priority does make a difference, meaning which object do you select first is going to set the basics of which one is going to be resized. We'll also be going over the spacing. We'll go through some of these shortcut keys. As well as the different options in here, as well as the distribute function. And again, I came up with a couple of small examples of what you might use it for. With you all using the software every single day, you're probably going to come up with quite a few other scenarios to use this. And I would always love to hear some of your input on this to find out, hey, how are you using this function? It may be something I can share during our workshops in order to actually help another Flexi user. So let's actually jump in and actually see if we can't show you a few things on this. So what I've got here is the Flexi software open. And from there, we'll just start out with the arrange menu. And we're going to go into the align objects first. And again, we'll go through the top as well as the bottom. I'll also show you a few shortcuts and show you a few problems that we've run into or that I have run into on my system that might actually make some sense to you as well. So the whole purpose of using the align function is to take two different objects. For example, we'll just make a copy of this button or this object here, resize it just to make it a little bit larger. Obviously, you can see in this case, we're trying to set up a sponsor banner 4 foot by 4 foot. And with that, the sponsor banner in the middle is off center. So how do we actually arrange this or move this center piece in relation to the rectangle here to make it perfectly centered? There's quite a few different ways of doing it. And again, a lot of you may have remembered some of the shortcuts from the past. But essentially what we can do is first select the two, go to the Arrange menu, we'll go to Align, and we're going to center both here. Now notice in here you have an icon. You also have the shortcut key. This is for your keyboard. So Control 5 will work. We'll go over that here in just a minute because I want to explain a problem that does pop up on some systems. So from here, we're going to go ahead and click on both centers. And you notice that in this case, it just happened to work out that the rectangle or the box itself stayed in its current position and the sponsor banner lettering actually moved to the center of that box. The reason it did it in that order is that's the way I drew it. I drew the rectangle first, then I drew the actual sponsor or typed in the sponsor text second. So it remembers what you drew first as being the priority object if you're selecting both. But if we undo this, if I select the sponsor banner text first, hold my Shift key and click on the rectangle, Arrange, Align, both centers, it'll move the rectangle box. So you always have to keep in mind, if you want that box to stay in its current position, you have to select it first, because most of the time you don't remember which one you drew first or typed in. Hold your Shift key, select the second object, Arrange, Align, both centers, and we're perfectly squared up. So that works with both centers. But what if we want to take, for example, this box and align it to the left-hand side of what our page is? Well, while we're at it, let's discuss the page. In Design Central, this box actually, when you first start a new file, by default, it will bring up a page. From there, I can, in Design Central, change the size of the page itself. Right now, it's set up as an architecture D, 36 by 24. I don't know what architecture D is. I sure don't know what A, B, and C is. But I do know what 4x8 banner or 18 by 24 yard sign is. So I can change these and even add to these as much as you want by clicking on this button right here. So I can actually delete, I can add, and actually make a list of the ones that you more popularly use. So if, for example, or in this example, I want to take this square and then move it to the left-hand side of the page. Select the rectangle, Arrange, Align, and this is where we're using the second half of that menu and actually choosing left to page. So when we click on that, it pops that left-hand side of the rectangle even with the left-hand side of the page. Now with that, you also, again, you have shortcut keys. So if we go back to Align and notice, if we want to now take it to the far right-hand side of the page, I can go right edge to page. That is Control, Shift, and 6. Let me explain that. Let me click on it first, and we'll show you what it is. If you notice here, and I'll move this up, I've created really, really good artwork here, but I actually drew a representation of the number keypad on the right-hand side of most of your keyboards. Not all keyboards have this, but this is the standard number pad. And the way it was designed to work is if you want to take two objects or any object, and I want to take this object and I want to line it up to the top of another one. So if I actually take another one, I'll color it black so we can see the difference between the two. And let's go ahead and actually make this a little bit wider so we can use it in a different section here. So if I want to select these two objects and I want to actually align them both to the top, meaning move that black box up even with the top, I should be able to here hold my Control key down and hit the number 8, and it should pop this to the top. All right, so it works perfectly fine on my keyboard right now. But here's one thing that does not work. If I select this option, or at least it did not work earlier. So in order to actually make this box move up to the top edge of the page, you can hit Control, Shift, and 8, and it should move it to the top of the page. But you see, it's not working with my number or with my keypad. It's making copies. So depending on the type of keyboard I have found, it does make, sometimes this function does not work. So what you can do You can still use the shortcut keys, but use the control and the shift. But instead of using the number pad on your keyboard, you have to actually hit your number keys up above the regular letters on your keyboard, and it should bring it up to the top. I am not sure if that is a bug in the software. I would like to think that it is not, but also I would like to hear from you all if you happen to run across this same problem. If it is, then it's something that I need to get engineering we can look into. But this is also a fairly new keyboard. I'm wondering if it's maybe a driver issue or something along that lines. So just keep that in mind. But going back to the keypad, if your keypad works, oh, by the way, that problem only seems to be happening when I'm trying to align it to the page, only to the page. I can select multiple objects and it still works using the keypad, but only when I go to the page. It's something about holding the control key down. I'm not sure, the control and the shift together. I'm not sure what it is on that. But from here, like I said, let's go back to two different objects here. And again, just to give you an example of this. Think of this as basically your shortcut keyboard here. So if I want to take these two and align them to the left, I have to hold my control key down and I would hit number 4 and it should bring that to the left. If I want to bring them to the bottom, it's control 2 and all the way around. If I want them both to be perfectly centered horizontally, left or right, control 3 does that. Or I'm sorry, that does vertical. I actually have that wrong. So we should have control 7 here, and that will pop it in. It is vertical. I'm sorry, I was wrong. So again, going back, selecting these, control 3 and control 7. Well, let's see here. Did I freeze up? And let's see here. Acts like they're grouped together. And this, again, this may be my keyboard that I'm having trouble with because, again, going back and forth to these different ones, it seems to be working in some cases and some not. But again, it should, by using the control key, select these two objects and basically go to the top, the bottom, the right, the left. Again, both centers for 5, and it should pop them in correctly that way. So that's really the gist of aligning objects. It doesn't have to be just rectangles. It can be any object really for that matter. In the align menu, I get this question quite a bit. What is the option for text baselines? And basically what that is if you have, for example, I'm going to move this back down in the bottom. Let's say I have 2 lines of text that I typed in completely separately. Again, this is text. Notice in Design Central, the text icon tab is up here. When I click on that text tab, you see the baseline on each one. Well, they are, again, they're independent. I did type them in completely different or completely separate of each other. But if I want them to be perfectly level, depending on the font, sometimes it's not always easy to line them up. And aligning to the bottom or aligning to the top may not work. For example, let's say I have a lowercase g. Well, line bottom won't work. If I have, in this case, it's a capital L. Well, if I change this to a capital S, it's got a slightly rounded top, which normally goes above the top line, so it's not going to match either. So in order to make this work, you can select these 2 objects or text pieces here. Go to the Arrange menu, go to Align, and Text Baselines. Now what it's done is it's put the baseline even on both. All right. So that's where that comes in, or that's one of the options that you run into on the Arrange and Align menu as well. So moving on from that, what we've got is sizing. I get quite a few people asking about how do I set 2 different objects exactly the same size very quickly, but they might be the different width or the different height, and there's some variables there. Well, we make it really, really simple. So if I have 2 objects, 2 different thicknesses, but I want to set these both to be exactly, bring out a guideline, exactly the same width. And again, keep in mind, priority makes a difference. So in this case, if I want this box up top here, which right now is 7 3/4, if I want it to actually come out to be the 12.209 that this one is, I'm going to select the priority box first. hold my Shift key, select the second one, go up to the Arrange menu, go to Spacing, and when I click on Spacing, Design Central gives me the option of changing the width or the height. So in this case, I want it to be the same width as the other one. So when I hit that box, they're now exactly, well, let me grab the guidelines out here. Did everybody catch that? I'm choosing spacing. I'm choosing the wrong one. Arrange sizing. I was about to say I'm going crazy. But here, choosing sizing and then clicking on same width, it'll actually set them both to the same width. And then I can use my alignment tools. So hopefully everybody remembers which one is it to align to the left. Control 4. So now they're perfectly centered, perfectly left to right, because again, they're both exactly the same size. This also works if you want to set them to the same height. I can go back to Arrange, not click on spacing this time. We're trying to size it. So go into sizing, I can change it to same height. Now, it does that proportionately. Let me turn the volume down here. And from there, I can actually now change it back. If I uncheck proportional here, I should be able to select this one and arrange sizing, same width, and it keeps the exact same size or same height, as well as adjust the width automatically. But the reason it actually made it really, really long in that last case is I had proportional checked whenever I drew that rectangle to start with. So again, priority, excuse me, priority again comes into play. It's only going to work based on, or it's going to take the settings that you originally started with. So again, if you have a rectangle and you set it to proportional, if you change the height, it changes the width automatically. So if you just keep in mind, you may have to turn those on or off in order to get the desired results. Okay. So sizing's pretty simple, but notice this big J down here in the bottom. That's the shortcut on your keyboard for sizing. So I can take these two objects, literally, I don't have to go up to the menu. I can literally hit J on my keyboard after selecting the two, hit J, and it automatically brings me to the, and again, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm getting sizing and spacing mixed up. I'm sorry about that. But this will take us into our next step here. The shortcut for spacing between two objects is the letter J. And again, it's also under the Arrange menu right here. I think it's just that I haven't had enough coffee today, guys. I'm sorry about that. So what we'll do is go through this. Spacing between two objects, very simple. Select the two objects that you want to work with, hit J on your keyboard, or again, go up to the Arrange menu, go to Spacing, and now I can actually tell it how wide of a gap in between each one that I want. Now also notice in Design Central, this is the value, so let's set it to 2 inches. It shows us a preview of where that's going to actually fit to the right side of that box. But also notice I have the gap in between the horizontal left to right. But then these two boxes here is from end to beginning. So that from here is from the end of this box to the beginning of this box will be 2 inches apart. I can also set using this option, which is going to be from beginning to beginning. So it's going to take the left edge of this box over to the left edge of that box. So if I choose that and I set it to 2 inches, it's going to move it over here. Where it's at now is 13. So if I want that to be a 16-inch gap, for example, I hit my checkbox. Now to show that it worked, it's a matter of selecting this and lining that up. And again, you can see that's about the 16 inches. I'm not lined up on it perfect. But that's basically how you're putting gaps in between your objects at that point, or the spacing. Now, with that being said, the most common question I get in this Arrange menu, because again, I just don't know that a lot of people use it that often, is this distribute function. And I really struggled with this a little bit in the early beginning of working with it. But one of the examples that I came up with, if you can just think about sponsor banners or sponsor signs that you're going to go or put on the back of or on the outfield fence of a baseball field, for example. So if you were to imagine our current page size as being the fence, or at least a section of that fence, Well, you're going to have different size sponsor banners sometimes. So I'm just going to make a couple of copies of these, okay? And let me go back one step. We want to make sure in this case, well, let's center these. So control, what number was it? Anybody chime in? Oh, 5. So that'll actually take you there. So I'm going to select these two and group them together. That way when I move one, it moves both. And we'll group that one. So I'm going to make a couple of different ones. So let's just say my sales guy went out, sold a bunch of these things, and this is where it is, and this is kind of how we want it laid out, or that's about what it is. So if I need to put this one out here at the far end, the question is, when you go to install these, how do you know how much of a distance or gap in between each one you need to put in order to actually get an even space between each one? So first and foremost, let's align these to the top. Then from here, I'm going to go to the Arrange menu, and I'm going to choose Distribute. Okay. So from here, what we can do is go to Left Edge, and that's not the one that I wanted. Let's go up to Arrange. We'll go to Distribute, or let's see, let's go to Spacing. And you can actually choose in the spacing here, you have a Distribute box. When you click on this Distribute function, it actually gives you an even gap in between every single one of these. It automatically calculates this for you. So you don't have to do the math. You don't have to guess. You don't have to make multiple copies and just kind of space them out individually. So when I hit this checkbox, they're all now evenly spaced. Now, if I was to take these pieces here and drop these down again, and I go back up to the Arrange menu, Distribute, and I tell them to Left Edge, I can actually tell it or plug in, it's actually now set up a gap based on this. They're all even. So from the left edge to that one is 5.57. Well, from the left edge to that one, 5.57. So we're distributing this gap out evenly based on what option that we're choosing here. The option we're choosing is what edge are we starting with? Whether it's the right edge, left edge, or if we're actually doing them based on centers, things like that. So this is one of those that you'll want to play with, but here's the whole key to the distribute function. It controls the gap or the spacing in between each of these automatically for you without moving the far left side and the far right side. That's the key to distribute, because it's distributing the spacing or the gap in between. It's not changing the right and the left. So that is a completely different thing to look at whenever you're used to working with spacing or you're used to working with sizing. Because in the old days, it would be one of these things that, heck, I'm trying to guess this out. I might even try to do something along the lines of, let's just draw a box and let's put this in here. We'll make copies of it and let's see how close we can get and things in order to try to make sure that they're even. But let's say this one, they change and say, all right, it needs to be a 4x6. My salesman did a good job, went out, sold a little bit larger of a sign. So let's take this one and just increase the size of it just a little bit. Well, now it looks bad because we have uneven spacing. Let me get rid of these two things here. So we can just simply select these two objects again, or all of these objects again, go back, distribute, and choose left side or centers or anything from there. We'll go to center. And now we've got basically from center to center is exactly the same. Okay, so the measurement from the center of this one to this one is a certain size, but from that center to the next one is exactly the same size. But notice our gap is different. So if you want the machine or want the software to do the math for you to where you have even gaps, you're actually going to go up to the Arrange menu. You're going to go to Spacing, and you choose this Distribute function. It automatically plugs in the value for you. When you hit check, now you have an exact measurement in between each and every one of them. Another one that comes into play is grommets on banners, because this was one example. But again, if we were just to move this down, if this page was a banner, for example, sure, we can actually draw a small little grommet here, for example, move it to that corner. One option, arrange, step and repeat. We change our step and repeat functions here. So we're going to actually go this way. We only want one high. Let's say we need 4, but here, all right, I'm plugging these things. I'm holding it down, and I'm getting them lined up. But all right, so I check that, but that gap on this side, less than that side. Well, if I move this one exactly to where I want it to be, and I select this, move these to where they need to be in relation to the banner, then it's a matter of going in, arrange, spacing, distribute, turn it on, check, and you can see it's going to move them. Now they're perfectly, perfectly even gap from each other. It doesn't necessarily have to be 2 foot apart. I'm not sure how many banners that actually, depending on the environment, the temperature, and so forth. When you send an 8-foot banner, it might be 8 foot 1/8 or 8 foot and a quarter, or even 7 foot and 7/8. So I mean, you're not going to be able to always get exactly 2 foot from each grommet to the grommet, center to center. So this is just one of those ways of actually getting an even more consistent look using that distribute function. Okay, so that's basically those 3 or 4 options in a nutshell. But one thing I also wanted to go over whenever it comes to the arrange menu that does come up quite a bit, and most of you veterans are going to know this, but ordering is very, very important as well. It's also in the arrange menu, and I'm hoping that everybody does understand the whole reasoning for, or the functionality of going from order to back and order to front. It is basically layering the objects on the screen, which will also make a difference of how they print and how they cut as well as how they're actually used in the other software. But to work with these, you just go to the arrange menu. You'll be able to go into the order option here, and again, you have shortcut keys, and again, you can tell it to bring it to the front. You can forward it 1, you can send it back 1. Just all depends on the complexity of your design, and where exactly you need that piece layered, especially when you're doing vehicle wraps, things like that. You might have in some of these files, I don't know, I mean, one of the samples I did just for the workshop, there's probably 1900 different layers in it. So you're always going to have to be using this. But to work with these, you can actually just go to order. We'll actually then send it to the front and go from there. But in conclusion, essentially what we can do, or one other feature, is you can select an object. Keep in mind, it doesn't work with every one of them because it is contextual keys, or it's contextual subject keys, to where if I right click on this object, it'll give me different options. This menu may or may not have order in it depending on whether you created an outline. It's going to remember the last effect that you chose on it, so it may only show you options for those menus or for those features. But in this case, I'm selecting the object. I can go to order and I can send it to the back. I can also select all 3 of these, right click, and I have my align and I have my sizing options here as well. So it's not always that you have to go up to the arrange menu. You don't have to remember your shortcut keys. As you saw earlier, I kind of got the 2 mixed up. But right clicking a lot of times will give you these different options, to where you can actually work with these fairly quick. Hopefully that was basically giving you a good rundown of the basics of how to use these 4 tools. Again, we went over the alignment, we went over spacing, sizing, distribution of the distribution function, and then we also added in there just a little bit about ordering. So hopefully with this, you'll be able to actually cut down anywhere from a few minutes per design to even a little bit more sometimes. Those minutes add up over the day. And hopefully at that point, you're going to start seeing a little bit better bottom line and a little bit higher profits due to a little bit faster design capabilities. So with that, I'll go ahead and open it up for any questions. I see a few on here, or a few comments. Ray, you said distribute will make our life so much better. I'm glad that helps out. Again, it's not something that I used every day when I was working with the software, but actually thinking about it, there's really, really good uses for it. It's a matter of really coming up with these and really trying to make sense of them. And the only way to make sense of some of these types of tools is play with them. You can actually take a lot of different options here and then select the two objects, go up to the menu. Don't be afraid to mess around with it. I know you probably don't have time, but you know, the 5 minutes that maybe I saved you in your workday for tomorrow, take 5 minutes, try to learn something new in the Flexi software by clicking on something that you're just not used to using or that you haven't used before. One other thing is if you have the cloud version, be sure to click over here on the knowledge base. I highly recommend you spend some time looking over that knowledge base. It will have a lot of these tutorials or a lot of help features in the software to show you how to use these tools. Just keep in mind, it tells you what the tool does. It doesn't necessarily give you a real life application. You have to come up with that. Though that's the difficulty in translating the tool to the application. But again, hopefully this will help you out. So any questions that we can help you out?
Let me take a look here. So looks like we have a
Thanks.
few. John mentioned, he said, I wish you would lose the SAI mouse trails as it's hard to see exactly what you are pointing to. John, is that where it says SA International next to the mouse? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, he said yes. I think
Okay.
that's just a feature in the webinar
Yeah, that's
function,
the
I
click
think.
webinar. Unfortunately, that's not specific to his computer. So unfortunately, there's not a lot we can do about the name there. But it looks like we do have a few more questions. Uh, Bob asked, how are you duplicating the object so quickly?
Good question. A lot of different ways of doing that. You can select the object. I'll show you the long way and then show you a couple of the short ways. Long way is going up to the excuse me, the edit menu, and you have the option to copy and paste. You also have the option to duplicate. So I can duplicate and move things around and go from there. The way I'm doing it very quickly is I'm holding or selecting the object. I'm holding my control key down and notice the mouse changes. It adds a plus sign. Then I click and drag with my left mouse button and let go, and it gives me a second object. So that's normally the way I do it. Now again, you can right click, I believe, and you have the duplicate option in there as well. So keep in mind, right click will help you out, especially it'll help speed you up over time.
Excellent, thank you. So another question from Chad said, can you add a margin and still align to the edge of the page, but not the margin?
No, not that I'm aware of, not to the margin, but here's kind of, I played with that, especially with these sponsor signs. Another function I came up with, or just trying to come up with an application, I was sitting at my office at the house and I was looked out on the back porch and I saw all the spindles on the back porch. I'm like, how'd they come up with the actual spacing? How did they figure that out? I'm sure there's a perfectly good carpenter's way, mathematical way of doing that. I don't care. I got the software to do that. But here's what I did. In order to make that work, especially to the page, what I did is I actually created a thin line. Click and drag to create a line. So I actually created a small object right there that has absolutely really no thickness to it whatsoever. So if I add that to both sides and align it to the page, whatever is in the middle will then at that point get distributed from there. So if I bring that over, line it up here, and let me just scoot these over to where they all fit just so I can show you this. And let's say I want this object to start not on the edge, but I want a margin of whatever it is. In this case, from the edge of this, I want to go over 1/2 of an inch. You can see that in the X value here, I believe. So we'll bring that over, and the same thing here. And just for speed and setup, I'm just going to drop it there. So then I can actually take these objects right in the middle. So now it's a matter of selecting all of these objects, which I don't need my grommets anymore. Selecting all of these, I can go up to the arrange, go back to resize, or spacing, I'm sorry, and then click distribute. When I hit my checkbox, now I should have that margin in there. So hopefully that's a shortcut, or at least a workaround that might get you to the end result that you're looking for.
Excellent. Okay, hope that helps, Chad. And it looks like several other people have suggestions on how to copy things quickly. Rick said select the object, press Control and drag it, and then John
Sure.
said Control Shift copy,
Very
keeps them
good
straight.
point.
Select object, Control and right key. So there's lots of different ways.
Yeah, for example, yeah, and just a couple of them. So if you want to select this object, you want to make a duplicate, and you want to drag it over, but it needs to be exactly the same top. You can actually control and drag, and I can move it anywhere I want. While I'm holding the control key, if I hit my shift key, it will actually pop or snap to it horizontal or vertical there. It can also go 45-degree angle, or whatever angle that you have set in your preferences under constrain angle. So if you go to edit and preferences, you can go to constrain angle, and I can change this value. So if you need it to be on a 33-degree angle, for example, I can click OK here. So now when I bring it down, it's pop or snapping to a 33-degree angle. So playing with your preferences can actually make a difference in those angles as well.
All right. So let's see if anyone has any more questions. Go ahead and type them in. Okay, we've got Rick here. It says, how do I align the right edge of one box with the left edge of another? Is there a way to get several boxes in a row of different sizes to touch?
Ooh. Let's see. Let's play with that just for a second, because I think that's actually in the distribute function. So if I understand you correctly, you want to take the left edge of this box and match it to the edge of this box, but at the same time can repeat that step all the way through the rest of them. So literally all of them are touching, so almost like a checkered flag pattern maybe, or something like that. I believe we might be able to go into the arrange menu, go to distribute here. In the distribute, we'll just take, let's say, we'll actually choose left edge in this example. Well, first off, here's the thing. I think what it works. I need to know the size of this box first. So just for argument's sake, let's set it to 3 inches wide. So now if I have multiples here, and I think this is only going to work for identical objects or of the same size, but you should be able to arrange, distribute. Then from there, left side, you can actually set your gap in between, I guess, but I don't know of a way, unless you're just doing them side by side. I mean, from here, we can go to spacing, set our spacing to 0. And if we take these, because if I take all of these and I go to spacing and set it to 0, it moves all of them to 0.
Okay, and he says
So
the boxes are different lengths.
Yeah, if they're different lengths, I think you're going to have to actually work with them 2 at a time in order to get that to work, or to get them to line up. As far as I can think of right now, it's something that I will look at, but I can select these 2, set my spacing to uncheck distribute here, but go to 0 and check here. Then I can select this box, which is my priority box, and set this spacing to 0, and then I'm just alternating from each one. I have to set again the priority in order to actually get these to a 0 gap in between all of these. I think that's a long way around, but I don't know right off the top of my head. But again, I will leave it to Rick to come up with a tough one, I tell you that. But yeah, Rick, I'll see what I can come up with on that and see if I can't help you out, and make some sense of that.
All right, thank you. So Chad said, for future, could we look into adding to the Align tab to top left corner, top right corner, bottom left, and bottom right?
I would love that. I really like that idea. It's something, again, that once I started playing with these a little bit more, it makes perfect sense. As of right now, the best option is use two functions. So it is something I will bring up to as a feature, as in not really a snap to corner, but again a line to each corner. I think that is a great point. I'm sure almost everybody in here would use that right now.
Okay, and then regarding the previous question with the boxes, Sean said you can choose all the boxes at the same time and choose horizontal spacing to 0.
So setting spacing to all of them. So we select all of these at this point, Jay. It may be. So we set to 0. It's a matter of making sure that you're choosing the right option here. So Rick, this may be the answer for you there, right? I was thinking more on the align side, but no, you're exactly right. And thanks for bringing that up. So if I set that to 0, from there I hit my checkbox. They're all perfectly matched right on the edge.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
That should help with that. All right. Well, I appreciate you all coming today. I appreciate all the questions. I appreciate the feedback that you've given to help answer. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month. Bye.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate you coming in.